everyone. I'm Trisha Grant. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at MediaSmarts, and I'm so happy to be here today with Janie Chang and Susan Juby, two Canadian authors. Janie is a nationally best-selling author of historical fiction. Her novels, including The Porcelain Moon and The Phoenix Crown, co-authored with Kate Quinn, draw on Chinese history, family mythology, and stories swept under the rug by history. And Susan is an award-winning BC author and creative writing professor at Vancouver Island University. She's best known for her beloved Alice MacLeod trilogy for young adults, which was adapted into a television series, and her Leacock Medal-winning novel, Republic of Dirt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for inviting us.
So this is actually a really wonderful crossover for me because I originally come from the publishing world. I worked in marketing and publicity in publishing. And so it's really nice to have this kind of crossover between, the book publishing world and media literacy. So the reason why we had this connection is because Janie approached MediaSmarts last year as she was undertaking an open letter campaign advocating for a national digital media literacy strategy, which is something MediaSmarts has also been advocating for many years. And so we were really heartened to see the support that Janie's open letter has been garnering since she launched it a few months ago. So far, there are over 100 signatories, I believe. Is that right, Janie? And any kind of notable names you'd like to share of who's signed it so far?
Margaret Atwood and Louise Penny would be at the top of the list for name recognition.
Nice. And so what was the initial spark for you, and what made you decide that, authors should be ones kind of talking about this issue?
The spark actually was the federal elections last year when I saw how much disinformation was being distributed online, all of it trying to influence voters. And I wanted to post some tips on social media about how to identify disinformation. And I asked Susan to help. And in the weeks leading up to the election, we posted a bunch of tips. And one of them was, can you fact check as well as a fifth grader in Finland? And the articles that I read for that post opened my eyes to what the Nordic countries are doing and what Canada is not doing. And it was so clear that the Scandinavian countries were not relying on tech companies to rein in disinformation and hate speech. They weren't trying to enforce a ban on social media. Their attitude can seem to be, you can't control the source of disinformation, but you can give children the skills, the awareness to resist harmful messages. You can try to make sure disinformation doesn't land. So, yeah, I really believe that federal and provincial leaders need to think of this in terms of protecting young Canadians because it's healthcare, right? Protecting their mental well-being, it's protection against online manipulation and bullying, and this can range from sexual predators to recruitment by extremist groups. And if children can get better at recognizing and resisting online manipulation, they can make decisions based on factual information and they can outthink the harmful messages. But longer term, it's also national defense, if that doesn't sound too dramatic. Internal division in society is as destructive to our national security as any external threat. And we know that hostile foreign countries and extremist groups are attacking Canada, not via military means, but through disinformation. And some of it is aimed at younger Canadians. So if children grow up learning how to distinguish between fact, opinion, and analysis, then to me, this is as valuable an investment in national security as fighter jets, and for much less money, and with ongoing generational benefits, and with less environmental impact. Sorry, this is going on for so long, but also why authors? Well, an author friend who's also a longtime activist once told me that for some reason in Canada, authors carry more influence with politicians than one could imagine. So I hope it's true. But even if it isn't, the fact that so far more than 100 Canadian authors and members of the literary community, an identifiable demographic, have agreed it's time to make media literacy mandatory in schools. That draws attention. It makes for a more interesting headline, and it's a way to raise visibility for the issue, if nothing else.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more, Janie. And we think that the more that Canadian citizens, and in particular, notable Canadian citizens or names that people know, the more that people are supporting this issue, the more that it might get taken seriously, at a higher level. And so, Susan, when Janie brought this to you, was it an immediate yes? Was it something that you'd already been thinking about, or did it kind of open your eyes to something you hadn't really fully named yet?
It was an immediate yes for me. I think a lot about these things and share all of Janie's concerns. The more polluted and complicated and divisive our information systems get, we all pay the price for that. In my experience, younger people have a more sophisticated understanding of the information system that they're operating in, and a lot of them are checking out because it's just entertainment as opposed to information. And the place people get their news is from social media, from TikTok, all the rest of it, almost as a byproduct of being entertained. And so kind of that attention economy, all of that stuff, I think this having some kind of media literacy program is absolutely critical. I took one of those Are You as Media Savvy as a fifth grader when Janie and I were doing the campaign about misinformation during the election, and I failed it. And I am somebody who's very concerned about these things, and I failed it. Like I did not pick up on bias. It was very embarrassing. And I've read multiple books about our online information systems, and I still feel like I need more education. I need, and all of the things that Janie talked about with our national security, with the health and well-being of young people in this country. It seems to me that this is equipping them for a life where most of us live a big portion of that life online.
Yeah, and I wouldn't feel too bad. I think all of us we talk about media smarts as this being a lifelong learning exercise, right? It's not just something you learn in K to 12 and then you move on and you know it all, right? Because everything's evolving so quickly. So, yeah, don't be hard on yourself. I think also having that, we call it kind of intellectual humility, right? To know that like we still have so much more to learn and that we all do have our own biases that we need to overcome. Janie, the letter calls out Canada for, like you mentioned, falling behind countries like Finland or Sweden on media literacy. And you're somebody who writes stories that are rooted in kind of history and truth. How does it feel, to watch this kind of disinformation spreading when there is a nice practical solution that we all, it has been proven to work sitting right in front of you? What is that feeling like for you?
Oh, you're right. I mean, it's close. The solution is actually within close reach because Canadian public schools do already offer courses in media literacy. It's just that, unlike schools in the Scandinavian countries, they're not mandatory and they're not necessarily taught in every grade in a progression, like in a cohesive progression, in a stream that makes it clear that these are skills that help to address online disinformation. I mean, I looked through sort of the summary of curriculum in the provincial schools, and it's like some of media literacy skills are embedded as part of the English program. Some of it is in math, some of it is in history and civics and so on. And I believe that, I mean, it's so obvious to me and therefore also frustrating for me that our federal and provincial governments have not yet taken that next step from optional to mandatory. And that's all we're asking for. And I recognize that that's all is not a small thing, but the teaching tools are here, the pieces exist, they're created by organizations like MediaSmarts and other organizations. It's just that they've been created by a variety of groups and there may be replication. So, from what I've been told, there is no department or MP with a portfolio that's been tasked with media literacy for Canadians. And so this means there's a lack of consistent funding. We need that reliable funding to ensure that courseware development, if nothing else, keeps up with technology change, because it's going really fast. My first degree is in computing science, like before I became an author, and I cannot keep up. Like, I read and I can only get the most high level understanding of how it's AI and you know algorithms are being implemented. But we need to keep up with the technology to help train teachers on media literacy so that they feel comfortable teaching it, to monitor the results to see whether or not um, there are good outcomes from these media literacy courses, and for the federal government to do some of the work and the research so that provincial school systems don't have to replicate it.
Yeah, no, and selfishly, from our perspective at MediaSmarts as an organization who have been providing resources for K to 12 across provincial curriculum, we don't have core funding, and there are other great organizations doing work in media literacy that don't have core funding. And so, yeah, having that sustained support and having a national framework that would help, keep it consistent across each province would be, I think very beneficial for Canada, and for young people in our country that need this support. And Susan, you've written for young people quite a bit, and you work with young people. When you imagine a teenager today trying to navigate social media and AI generated content, all the things we've talked about, what worries you most about what they're not being taught?
Well, there's a lot to worry about. As I mentioned earlier, one of them is that because it's all so messy, and there's so much material that's untrustworthy, is that they opt out of serious subjects. They were like, oh, I don't like the feeling of this, and so I'm just going to watch 30-second reels that make me laugh. I do not, and if I'm going to engage in stuff, of course, there is the premium placed on things that are outrageous, all that kind of stuff. And I would also like, just facts don't work very well with young people. Like, just a list of facts, like, here's what you need to know about this form of misinformation or this form of disinformation. In my experience, talking to younger readers and also teaching undergraduates, what they respond to quite powerfully is personal stories, narratives about people who have, for instance, been radicalized online. There are lots and lots of stories by younger people saying, "Oh, okay, I happened to linger for a few seconds on some body image content, and before I knew it, I was being inundated with pro anorexia content." Or I went online looking for climate information. I'm concerned about the climate crisis. And before I knew it, I was inundated with right-wing racist content. Like, there are established channels that people, I might like to eat healthy. And before I know it, there are, something like seven accounts really who spread most of the health information, misinformation online, and that's everywhere. And so, like, having them understand the stories about how people have their attention hijacked, how they end up in places they never thought they would end up. That's something I found very effective, particularly when I'm teaching creative nonfiction, is I will give them stories and podcasts of people telling true stories in a way that they find very engaging. I have a 12-year-old niece, and we're sort of talking through her access to the internet, to social media, which she has no access to social media. But what I've done is I've given her some of the books about, some of the books written by people talking about how to prepare your teenagers for the internet. And she loves reading those books more than I love reading those books. Like, she wants to know why the rules are there. And these hair-raising stories about what kids are exposed to online are really powerful for young readers. So that's like, I hope that the curriculum can be as engaging as every other kind of curriculum. So for instance, if I could wave a wand, I would want them to set up, as a class, set up an Instagram account. linger on a couple of things, look at 2 reels and see what this algorithm starts doing. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about the algorithm of it all, the AI, right? The AI literacy that is, still so new, but really important for us to get right and to start implement. You have to get it right, and you have to start implementing it ASAP, right? Because it's evolving as we speak. And the letter itself does name AI, right, as an amplifier of the kind of divisive and negative content that we're seeing. And Janie, as an author, there's a lot of conversations happening around AI, of course. I've been seeing a lot of that and how challenging it is, right, to tell, even in writing, right, what's real, what's been AI generated. How has the rise of generative AI changed the way that you think about, your work and your readers in the world we're living in this AI generated environment?
You are so right when you say the literary community is just, I don't know, going through agonies of decision making and trying to understand what AI can and can't do. It ranges from no AI whatsoever to it's okay to use AI to summarize a book for marketing purposes, or it's okay to use AI to research things I want to put into my book, all the way to, well, with the right prompts, I can write the book I've always wanted to write, and actually, I am all for AI when it comes to doing things like speeding up discoveries in science and medicine. AI is all about pattern recognition. I want it used for spotting patterns that might lead to solutions, to cures, to new ways to interpret facts that were once viewed in isolation. But when it comes to creative writing, I'm pretty old school. Like on my last book tour, someone asked whether I'd be willing to use AI to write a novel, and my reply was kind of flippant, that AI is pattern recognition, and why would I want pattern recognition if I want to be original and creative? But the deeper answer would be that the process of writing, the plotting, the character development, the story arc, your choice of words, the prose, that's a process. And that's the journey that matters as much to a writer as the final output, because once you've experienced that full cycle of bringing an idea to life to the pages, you understand how doing it improves your craft of writing and your understanding of the essentials of story. I mean, one of the most intense and rewarding experiences while writing a novel is when you've put in the hard work, when you're living more in the world of the story than in your actual real world, and then you hit a roadblock, but then your characters come to life and they start telling you what needs to happen. They tell you who they are and how they would respond at this moment in the story. And it's intense and it's the most amazing sensation. It's like being on a high. And it's this high that keeps me writing, hoping for that feeling again with the next book. And I suppose that's what people mean when they say inspired by the muse. And I just can't imagine how working with AI would generate that same feeling for me. Oh, and for readers, well, I'm lucky because I write historical fiction, and not at all biased when I say this. I think that readers of historical fiction are smart and they're curious and they want the story to pull them into the world of the past. And if the book is well written, then it inspires them to check out the real history that inspired the novel. And hopefully, it means that they prefer words and stories written by a real person who's a history nerd, someone who has worked hard to share their passion for history through stories, and it's stories, not content.
Yeah, I've been following the conversation about AI in, the writing and publishing field, and there's been some really interesting crossovers between that and the education world and what we're hearing from young people, because we're hearing that on the one hand, they're being told, not to use AI in their assignments, but they're seeing their teachers using it to create lesson plans, and they're also being told that they need to learn how to use AI in order to be, successful in the future. So I think those kinds of mixed messages seem to be happening in many different fields. So we're close to the end of our time. And so I'd love for each of you, if you could, share your 30-second pitch for why, the federal government, why provincial governments should be funding and paying attention to this topic and to media literacy as a whole.
There is a reason, like the profit motive and the influence motive around this stuff is so critical. The tech billionaires are the richest people this planet has ever produced. And there is a reason those companies are fighting tooth and nail to stop any effort to reduce child harm, addictive algorithms, like you name it. And the reason is that because people are making money. And we have a social contract. If we're going to live all together, successfully, recognizing each other's humanity, doing the grit and hard work of becoming full people, that means that we need to understand what online is driving us away from that. Like whether it's the cognitive surrender of asking AI to do all of our thinking and creating for us, or it's like retreating into our camps and believing what the algorithm is feeding us. Like it's not healthy for anyone. And the other thing I wanted to say about the importance of this is that students in their classes learn about World War One, they learn about World War Two, they learn about Vietnam. They do not necessarily learn about the hybrid warfare that is currently unfolding on every information platform that we have. They don't necessarily know how different campaigns are being conducted against the West in particular, to the destruction of NATO, Brexit, even things like Alberta separatism. Like there are people making money and trying to create dissent and conflict and all the rest of that. And so the reason those Scandinavian countries have invested so heavily in media literacy is because their survival as a country partly depends on it. And that is true for Canada as well. So if we want to have a happy, healthy democracy, we need to get our feet under us about the attack that we are currently experiencing, which sounds very negative, but that's the reality.
Thank you. That is a great pitch. Janie?
Well, I've already said a lot, but if you believe that our education system should equip children for the world and for the digital age, then you have to concede that media literacy is essential to their education. And while the federal government can't dictate what happens in provincial schools, it can provide leadership and funding to make it easier, faster, more efficient for provinces to adopt. And it's a long-term investment, but we need to begin now. And the result will be generations of Canadians who are more resilient and knowledgeable.
Janie, if an author would like to get involved in this campaign, how would they do so?
Um, I have built a website. It's called CanadiansForMediaLiteracy.org. And there is a tab for open letter, and you can click on that to read the open letter. And then you can also see on that same page the names of authors who have already signed up. And if you agree, then you click on the tab that says sign the letter, and you'll see a form that asks for your name and your province and email address just to help validate. And then you have supported this very worthwhile and urgent campaign.
Amazing. Thank you so much. No, that's fantastic. And I have one last question before I let you go. And it's something that we ask all of our guests because we're obsessed with media of all kinds, Media Smarts. What's a piece of media you've consumed that you're into right now that you'd like to recommend, whether it's a TV show, a book, a movie, a podcast?
Sure. I am reading *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, which is a long, the history of humans as they exist now, and it feels very relevant to the difficulty we as a species are facing with this new information, the way we're processing information. It gets into the cognitive revolution and how human beings exist so much of the time in these agreed upon realities. And when you start to introduce some very negative stuff into those realities, we're very susceptible to it. Anyway, it's a fascinating book.
Yeah, I love that book. I feel like I think about that book almost weekly. Just, yeah, it's so fascinating.
Yeah, that book is on my to read list. But right now, I'm kind of preoccupied with something far more mundane. For the first time in my life, I will have an actual vegetable garden. We're getting raised planter beds built as part of a landscaping project on our rather challenging chunk of property. So I am obsessively watching YouTubes about growing tomatoes, okay? And admittedly, it's a bit of escape from the real world. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today and talking through this really important topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.